If you knew me before, you wouldn't even look my way.
And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here with Tim and Lauren, and we're going to talk about the amazing organization that you all created. And I really want to preface this by talking about how important a program like this is for people inside, right? Because so many people who are sent to prison for whatever reason, education is a barrier for a lot of people. And there's a huge difference between looking to an employer with a GED versus an actual diploma. And the work you all are doing is nothing but, just amazing. How did you come up with this idea or concept of providing this into that environment?
I know we're going to start by looking at each other, and it's exciting. It's kind of a crazy origin story for me. So, corrections education exists. It has existed for decades. Maybe, actually, probably centuries, right? So, the Correctional Education Association has been around for something like 100 years. So it's been around long enough to acknowledge that this work is happening behind bars all over the country, in county jails, state facilities, federal facilities, different types of detention centers. And I, in about 2009-ish, 10-ish, I was in my 20s, I was unemployed, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was in a thrift store, and I was in a book aisle and stumbled across a book called Couldn't Keep It to Myself by Wally Lamb. He was a really famous, successful author. He didn't write the book, but he went into a women's prison and held these writing workshops for the women who were incarcerated there and got them to learn how to tell their own stories. And so that's the book. It's a compilation of these incarcerated women. If you've seen Orange is the New Black, kind of similar, except take all the humor and nonsense out of it. It's TV, but the background stories that you see in that show that are really heartbreaking, show the non-criminal elements of women's lives that layered with barriers and marginalization and a lot of domestic violence and childhood abuse and trauma that sort of interlocks and intersects with criminal activity that often leads to incarceration. That's what the stories were like. And they don't talk about what got you to prison. It's this was my life. This is who I am as a person outside of the little iceberg you see as I'm falcon, right? I read that book on one of those little stools they have in the book aisle. I sat there and they read almost the whole thing in the thrift store. I was obsessed with the idea of going inside and helping people find their voice and find identities beyond their quote unquote dominant status. And at the time I was I want to work with women, I want to do writing. And so it was what do I do to make that happen? I had a bachelor's degree, really did not enjoy college the first time around, so I recognized I needed a master's. Dragged myself back to school, went to Oregon State, and fell in love with the program. Realized I had a place in grad school. Got all A's, got my master's of adult ed in 2012, and then tailored an internship for myself in the county jail. I lived in Eugene, but went to OSU. I was a lot of fun wearing beaver gear in Eugene, and I went to UO for undergrad, so go Beavs. Anyway, so go to both institutions and then have your reaction. Anyway. Went specifically to work in corrections. Got my first actual faculty position at Clackamas County Jail in 2014, which was the year the GED test changed, which we can get into if we drop out if we want to, but it was a nightmare year to be a GED instructor, particularly in corrections, because it went to computers. The test went to computers. So if you are in a corrections environment and you're not set up to have testing on a computer, which basically nobody was, it was an extra layer of bureaucracy and technical challenge. So that's how I started. And then I was adjunct, which is a nightmare, a lot of drama, underpaid, all the things. And so I was offered full-time at college in 2016 to teach at Large Correctional Center in the GED program, which was the prison outside of Vancouver, Washington. So I started there in 2016 and was full-time, and so really had the privilege and stability to rock and roll and make that program more than what it was. Tim showed up at Larch as an incarcerated individual in 2018, I think. already had a little tutoring experience. It was called teaching assistant at the time. And I realized there was a lot of heroic work happening in the TA position, and really the work they were doing was tutoring. So I always called them tutors. Their official position was teaching assistant and classroom assistant. And so once I realized the magic that tutors have as peers in a GED program where you have a lot of guys who don't want to be in class, who don't see the value, they're required to be in class. So it's not like they show up with like wings on and, yay, math today. It's very much the opposite. And me being yet another white lady with a badge, education, telling them that, algebra is good for you and it's going to help you get a better life. They're like, that's fun, right? Sometimes it was that, and sometimes it was, well, I just do this, and I'm like, they did not. But when it comes from somebody who is a peer, so looking at Tim here, he shows up in the same clothes, has to go through the same main line, has to go through the searches, has to go through the nonsense of being incarcerated, all the bells and whistles. When he says, look, like, I know this stuff feels useless. I get that you might not like the teacher. She's just like another lady, whatever. You guys don't get along. I can help you get there. I know there's value in this. Let me help you grow. Like, we can do this on the yard. We can do this in the gym. We can look at weights and look at unit conversions between the kilos that you're pumping iron on and change those to pounds. That's unit conversions. That's what she's showing you how to do. And so the peer aspect of it is also pretty prevalent across the country in corrections ed. What I learned doing this for almost 10 years now, more than 10 years now, is that these guys are heroes. These men and women who do the tutoring inside facilities for 42 cents an hour or something. Often they're volunteers. They are heroic. They're doing heroic work, changing and saving work. And people just don't know about it because unless they're inside the walls of the fences, you don't see it. And prisons are built that way on purpose, right? Like they are built to catalog and hide people that society has deemed unfit for freedom. And so with that becomes a lot of invisibility. And that's intentional. You're not supposed to think about people. That's the point. They're away and therefore you're safer. That's the rhetoric, right? That's the propaganda. And so of course you don't know that these tutoring programs are happening. And so it really became a big piece of my mission, I guess, beyond my job description to bring visibility and equitable pay, which never happened in DOC, of course it didn't, to the folks who are doing this work. When the prison closed in 2023, we had raised the graduation rates from about 15% to about 85%. And that was because of the introduction of the high school credit recovery program, which was an alternative to GED testing, which was a nightmare. And mostly because of the peer tutor army that we had built. We had sometimes up to 9 tutors at a time for 30 guys, which is a great ratio. So when the prison closed and I lost my job, Tim had been out for a while. I contacted him and I said, how about doing this on the outside? How about doing this in reentry centers now that you're out? If I can pay you 100 times what you made inside at 42 cents an hour, about $42, about $30 an hour for online. Like, you interested in continuing this work? Because I know you're the guy to do it. He's like, of course I am. You don't even have to ask. So the Rebel Academy was born in 2024, and it's really taken off since then because, not surprising to either of us, the model works. It works inside and it can work outside if you have the right people and the right supports in place. That was a lot. You want to add me? I want to give you a chance to add.
No, for sure. So to piggyback off that, and the other side of why the work that we do is so important, and why the work that we do just plain works, right? Is so we talk a lot about the outcomes and the results and the model student basis, right? So obviously students can relate better to somebody who's experienced similar circumstances to them. She talked about, we walk the same yards, we eat at the same chow hall, we live in the same house, right? But there's also a profound growth that happens on the tutor side as well. And I know this is true because I've experienced it myself personally, and I've also watched other people experience the same kinds of growth and maturity who for my colleagues, my other tutors, the people that I worked with while incarcerated. So there's this thing that's pretty common amongst people who are incarcerated, and that thing is that growing up or whatever your life journey, whatever the journey that brought you to become incarcerated is, it involves a lot of powerlessness and trying to grasp at some kind of control over your life, whether that be because of like outside situations or internal turmoil, whatever it is. A lot of people who are incarcerated have lost their sense of stability, of self-love, and of just feeling like you have just even the ability to accomplish things, right? And so people who are facing those kinds of things, they tend to act out in negative ways to try to gain some form of power. Like, what can I control, right? So if I am a person who feels not in control of my own life, well, what can I control? I can go do a drug, and that makes me feel like I'm in more control of my life because I can change the way that I feel with this action. Or I can go rob a store, and that makes me feel in control because I told somebody to give me whatever it is that I'm taking from them, and they gave it to me, right? And that's a sense of control and a sense of power, right? Well, in the everyday work of peer-to-peer tutoring in an incarceration setting, you get to watch people who have never really experienced control over their own lives take the reins, so to speak, right? And once they start making the decisions to do the work, to get the education, and to start reaching some of these goals, it's a shift. And it's not only a shift in the student once they realize that they can succeed, and that self-esteem starts building, and like the epiphany of like, oh, I'm not what society tells me that I am, and I actually can be successful, and I can, a normal life that doesn't require me to, be stolen from my family for years at a time in some cases. It's a very profound realization that you don't have to hurt other people in order to, and that's huge, right? I went from literally the bad guy, like Billie Eilish style, like if you saw me on the street and you owed me money, you were probably not staying on that same street for very long. And I went from somebody who, like, the people that I associate with and who know me now, like, if they felt like they were in danger in the street and they saw me, that would be a relief to them because I'm no longer scary to people. I don't have to be, because intimidation is empowering in the world. You know what I mean? Helping somebody achieve something that they probably couldn't, or even if they could have, still were a part of the catalyst of them achieving that thing, like that helping people be successful create success in yourself, and it builds that kind of self-esteem. So like I had a one flip in just the way that I saw the world, the way that I saw other people, just the way that I experienced life. And so that's why I'm so passionate about the work. One, I've seen the results, right? Numbers don't lie. And two, I've seen just the maturity that I've had in doing the work, and the growth that I've seen other people have who are doing the work, and the growth that I've seen people have who are experiencing the benefits and the products of that work. So, yeah, it's just,
and it's so powerful to see it as somebody who gets to just orchestrate that, which was my role. I went from instructing a class of people who are sleeping on desks and talking back and don't want to be there, talking to each other and drawing and staring out the window. I went from trying to think middle school, but grown ass men, because that's very much what it's like. I went from that to trying to keep up with tutors coming in my desk and they're like, this student needs the next packet, this student needs the next packet. I'm like, I'm out of packets. Like, I gotta run down the hall, make 20 photocopies right now, get this guy set up for testing, get that guy set up for testing, make sure I'm getting the tutors what everything they need. I'm running out of pencils because they're burning through pencils so fast that I can't keep up with them. And so to get to be in that position and to just sort of direct traffic and be reactive to success instead of reactive to bad behavior, which is what prison is all about. It's stay in line, stay behind the red tape, tuck your shirt in, make your bed, get some mainline on time, lights out, shut up, sit down, don't interfere with authority. Prison's all reactive. It's like you step over the tape and now you're in trouble. You didn't tuck your shirt in, now you're in trouble. Get pulled over on the sidelines, they call it.
You forgot your name badge to chow because
Oh,
they
you don't
woke
have
you
your
up
ID?
at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And to flip that whole paradigm and to get to see guys light up and they show up to class and say, this is the only time I feel like a person is when I'm in the classroom. Instead of a number and I'm treated like a person. I hope for the first time in my life this is the only thing to see that I've ever done that is worthwhile. It's the only time I've ever done anything worth celebrating. And to just get to be a part of that and watch and give that autonomy and trust the tutors, which is also really counterintuitive in a prison environment. Like, I trust my inmate tutors. Like, yes, take these 3 guys to the library, come back and show me what you got in 3 hours. And they would. They'd show back up and they'd be excited to show me on the board, like, I can do quadratic formula, watch this. No problem. Give me the hardest problem, Izzy. And they're excited to show off their algebra. That's not normal.
And it's interesting that you bring that up too, because like if you look at it from a psychology angle, right? The more you tell people what to do, the more people are going to push back because people don't like being told what to do, right? They want to have some sense of autonomy. And one of the things that I struggle with even today is the narrative that's put out there about prison and about the people that are in prison. Because if you listen to what the media says, you listen to what everybody portrays, it's like they're dehumanizing humans. And that to me has always been like, it makes my skin crawl. Because it's like, why do you, like, if we could do so much to help so many people if we would flip that around and give people some autonomy and something like that. And so, like, the idea and concept is always something that I've struggled with, is understanding why we paint this picture. And then when you take a step back at it, you realize that there's money tied into it. And the money tied into prison.
Like, let's call that out.
Oh, 100%.
Like,
yeah.
When most incarcerated men are black and brown, that's not an accident.
No.
It's not an accident. If you're not ready to have that conversation, like, I'm excited that we're trying to tame the animals. That's how a lot of staff inside look.
And that's bullshit. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. The minute you say a human is an animal, I don't want to hear from you. Like, you're a piece of crap. If you think any human is an animal, you're a piece of crap. Like, I don't understand that. So, like, take me through, like, that. So, like, this whole concept, because the other thing that I also, like, was curious about is, like, inside the prison, because you were talking about the environment a little bit. And we had sort of a conversation a little bit before we started about, in reality, I'm more scared of the guards than I am the inmates.
I mean, without delving too much into the weeds, if you think about it in terms of just case-by-case basis, when you're out there in the real world, we call it in the streets, right? You're out there in the streets, and there's not a barrier between somebody like myself, we'll say people who are currently incarcerated, right? And people who have never experienced any kind of, like, impact from the judicial system, excuse me. I am a lot less likely to affect you, for example, in a negative way, just me out and about doing my stuff. Now, that's not everybody, right? But just in general, inmates, we live in our bubble, right? CEOs, and this isn't everybody, there's a lot of really good ones out there and things like that. And I don't even necessarily, and this is getting a little bit philosophical, but I don't even really necessarily believe that it's their fault that they feel that way. It's just social conditioning to believe that because people have made mistakes, because people have made choices for whatever reason that they make, right? I mean, this, you can't blanket statement anything like this, right? But in general, people who've made mistakes are bad people, and I don't believe that to be true at all. Now, I've met, while incarcerated, a lot of bad people, and I mean, it makes sense because when you're just shoving everybody who's ever committed any kind of crime into one place, then yeah, you're gonna distill out some of the worst characters, right? But I've met some of the nicest guys, and like some of the who just, who knows why somebody makes the choices that they make, right? And the way the legal system is set up these days, and that's a whole different soapbox, probably for another podcast. That you were talking about the for-profit aspect of it, and the fact that, you know, our prison system is a business, and it is. So it's like you're shoving a whole lot of people who haven't had a whole lot going for them to begin with before they got into that situation. We're not worried about the people outside of our own pod because they don't even really exist to us, because we never really existed to them. We were just somebody that they decided to shove aside and, tuck underneath the rug so that, they wouldn't have to smell us or look at us or whatever it was that. And so the people that are comfortable with the levels of dehumanization and the people that compartmentalize the way that they treat other human beings and excuse their poor behavior because of that's just what it takes to keep people safe. And these are the measures that we have to take to make sure that everybody's safe because of whatever reason. It's like that, yeah, I'd be scared of that person too. I am, even if I wasn't somebody who was just as involved, somebody that can look at somebody else and be like, I'm in charge of you because you aren't the same as me. That's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never looked at another inmate while incarcerated or outside of being incarcerated and have them look at me and view me as less than. I have to at least do something in order for them to make an opinion. I look at you and you're an inmate, we're on the yard. We are neutral parties until something politically, I don't mean like government politically, but like prison politics.
Yeah.
Prison politics. Dictates that I have to be in action. But we're all just trying to survive in there like anybody else. We don't get to go home. That is work. These guys that come in for 8 hours a day think they're hot stuff and then they get to leave and go home to their whatever families and lives and things outside of that. That's not my reality. My reality is you're a shift. You have another person that comes in and they're another 8-hour shift. And then there's another person with another 8-hour shift. And maybe I don't know some of you because I have to sleep. You know what I mean? But yeah, I know all these people because guess who's sleeping right next to me?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you said that can't be emphasized enough. Sort of line in the sand that society has drawn between good people who don't do time because they're good people and so why would they? And everybody else who's bad people or decent people who just have gotten lucky for a long time and not getting caught and then actually get caught, right? Like there's the good and there's the bad, and it's reinforced in religious rhetoric, it's reinforced in political rhetoric, especially now with the divide we have. There's this very like either with us or with the terrorists push setup, right? Like this really stark and simple-minded divide between good and evil. And similar to what Tim said, like you meet some of the nicest people. I had a tutor who was in prison. He'd never been in trouble. He'd never done anything wrong. He was driving a car. He had like less than 0.08 in him. He had like a beer, whatever. And the female passenger was unbuckled and having like a psychotic moment. Tried to take the wheel. Lost control of the car. They steered it onto the traffic. She was ejected from the car and died in his arms on the side. He did several years for vehicular manslaughter. So you're going to lump that guy in to a system and bunk him with somebody who intentionally murdered 7 people, for example, just as an example. And that's not what it's bunking or whatever, but just to lump in, because there are genuinely like broken, you could argue evil people, whether that's like a neurotic disorder or brain damage, or if you do these interviews with these guys who have killed and have no remorse, and you see that shit on TV, right? Like go to the worst, and then we all think like everybody in prison's like that guy, and what a scary place. I see a face tattoo, and I'm gonna cross the street because he's gonna stab me. Like it's just not that way. You have all of these different walks of life and all of these different really awful, heartbreaking stories. I heard about people pimping out their children for heroin. I've heard stories of just DUI accidents, and these people are full of remorse for the things that they've done. And the addiction very often tied to drug substance use disorder, and addiction issues. Anything about addiction issues, it's that's trying to cover some pain or some underlying problem with your childhood and your parents were using and they turned you on to selling drugs. What choice does a 9-year-old have? That's what you're told you to do to eat.
100%.
And it's like, oh, they make bad choices. What about a 9-year-old? They started getting locked up at 13 because it was easier to sleep in. Okay, I can't look at you and let what you're telling me taint my understanding of what the next guy's going to say and the next guy's story. And my job as a teacher is not to come in here and judge you for your past, but to prepare you to be my neighbor when you get out. And by God, I'm going to do the best I can to assume that there is some good in you and that you want something different for yourself. Even if your rhetoric to my face right now is just, I'm tough. I've had guys who have murdered spouses and girlfriends, and then I have the Tims who have rough upbringings and have that transformation and are very clearly wanting and willing to do something different. I don't really care what he did in the past. I'm all about what he's doing now and that he has potential for a very bright, amazing future where it is no longer somebody's job to watch him. Now it's his job to help the next guy. And that's why I call the work heroic, because it defies the stereotype of what society thinks a quote unquote felon is. That's the tutors inside, and they exist. And I think there's more of them, honestly, than there are these incorrigible, inherently evil people.
I can attest from the shift, right? That minute that you hear from somebody in your position that says you're smart enough to do this, that you're good enough to do this, sometimes it's the first time they've ever heard that in their life.
Yeah,
And
we got that a lot.
Yeah. And so, like, the shift in your mental game, when I heard that the first time from a faculty, so no, you're not stupid. You're getting a 4.0 in my class. You're like, you're smart enough to continue. That was the shift that it took. And the minute we can stop having conversations about what horrible people are and say, no, they're just people who need help getting past whatever it is that they were. Because I remember the idea about prison and what I thought until I saw the realities is it's supposed to rehabilitate people and get them prepared for the life outside. That's not what really happens in there unless somebody goes through a program like yours.
Yeah, and I think it's important. So there's a lot there. So first of all, there's studies. There's a very famous study, and I'm not remembering the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a really famous study of K-12 teachers being part of this experiment, right? Where you tell a bunch of teachers, you're going to have a class full of these failing, behind, not so great students. And then you give another group of teachers a different group of students, and you say these are the A+ students, and you're getting high achieving students. And the trick of it is that the teachers who were told their students are behind, those are actually, they've been A+ students, they're 4.0s. But the teachers don't know that. And the great, quote unquote, great students are the ones who are failing. And so they tell the teachers the opposite. And the way that the teachers treat the students, if you treat people like they are F students, because that's what you have been told, guess what? All those students started failing. They had 4.0s. They were at or above grade level, and they start to act out and not do their work and fall behind. And this is the great part. The teachers who have what they thought were A+ students, when in reality those students were behind students, treat them like they are A students. And guess what happens? Anybody want to guess? They start performing like A students. And so I really don't give a shit what your GPA was before today. I really don't care why you're in prison. I don't care. The guy next to you might care because prison politics, and I'm here to focus on the fact that you are worthy of my time and a quality education, and that you are capable of succeeding at the level that I'm expecting you to succeed. And usually they don't believe it at first. And that's where most of the fighting and talking back comes from. Like, you think I'm ready for these fucking letters in math, and why is there an X? And I'm like, I expect you to have a temper tantrum. Let me know when you're done, because you don't have to like it, but I know you can do it. And so when you're ready to do it, let's do it. And most of them, especially if the tutor was sitting with them and it wasn't me, would come around and then it was like, I can't believe I'm doing it. I can't believe she's right. I can't believe I can pass this bitch of a test. I can actually do this test. I think I can pass this test. Oh my God, maybe I go to college. And this is the biggest thing that is counterintuitive in a lot of the correction staff, because I sat through 6 weeks of court training with correction staff. Yeah. I learned how to mace people. I learned how to do self-defense on a bob and beat the shit out of it with a stick. I learned about hostage situations and suicide prevention and how women are different, men are different, and are incarcerated, and all of the things. Like, I went through handcuffing and all the training that COs go. And we were trained to diffuse every request and conversation as, that's an inappropriate request, go back to your bunk. That's an inappropriate request, go back to your bunk. No, you can't have an extra pencil because that's manipulation. No, you can't ask for extra privileges because you're staff shopping and you're asking me and now you're going to ask somebody else the same thing. Like, that's how the training goes. And I understand it because manipulation is real. And the stuff that COs have to deal with, I have some amazing friends who are correctional officers. And I had a great colleague describe the whole CO world versus inmate world really aptly, she said, it's basically pitting the poor against the poor. It's basically like a gang war, except one has actual power and control and the other doesn't. And there was no more apt description I've ever heard of the paradigm of corrections staff. And there are plenty of incarcerated people who, because they are incarcerated and they're lumped into the system and they are so conditioned to lie and cheat and steal to get what they need, not what they want, what they need to survive, that you put them all in these tight, confined spaces and you deprive them of basic things. During COVID, when there wasn't even a lot of food, they couldn't visit. It was a mess. And you create conditions where to get what they need, you want to have an extra soup, and that's considered contraband. So it's a matter of like, what do the rules say is okay and not okay? What are the conditions that you're creating that are going to set people up to manipulate and lie and cheat and steal more? Prison makes that worse, not better. And so, of course, COs are going to see, like, this guy's over here getting high in the bathroom. They deal with that. They deal with people cutting themselves. They deal with people tripping on too much spikes and, like, smuggling heroin. And they deal with overdoses. They deal with real fights, with real violence, and people getting really hurt and killed by other inmates. Like, all of that's real. All of that's very real. But again, I think the danger is in going through a situation like that, dealing with a riot, dealing with a suicide, dealing with like real terrible, awful violence and horrible things that they see, and assuming that like everybody that comes to the doors is inherently that guy. So that's where I'm like, yes, this is happening, or even see this happening and to point and say that's because that's bad. It's because he's here. You don't know how you would act if you were locked up. I'd be a different person too. I don't know what I would do if I was locked up to get some decent food and keep a banana under my bed. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of real truth to the perceptions that COs have because of the difficulty of their work too. And they don't make enough money. And yeah, they go home to families, but their alcoholism rates and divorce rates and suicide rates and lifespans are drastically just not in line with the status quo for other jobs. And so there's, you have to recognize that as well. It's hitting the floor.
Because I'm actually digesting that, right? Because that's a different angle that I've never even really thought about before.
With that, right? And so they're up against it to be like, I'm not going to interact with you because I see that you're trying to do the right thing. And then they catch flack from other COs for not writing up infractions or for not throwing a guy in the hole. Oh, so are you on his team now? Like, are you showing favoritism? What's next from you? And then they face scrutiny for those types of things. And it's a really fine line, just like it is with the tutors, to ride the fence between I'm working with staff really closely and reporting to staff about my guys, but also not being a snitch.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous position for tutors to be in, and they have to figure out how to balance that, or they just don't. And I think it's the same for COs in a lot of ways. They have to really find the balance between being good people and demonstrating that they're there for the right reasons without crossing the line and going down the slippery slope of manipulation, and you start bringing in drugs, and that happens. Like, you got COs doing time because they couldn't figure out how. So it's a difficult, complicated job. And I have a lot of respect for the ones who do it.
Do you think there will ever be a time where we get rid of the whole resident? To this day, I think it's the most inhumane. No. So I don't understand that. I don't understand that.
Well, some people just need to be on time.
Okay.
So you are pro segregation?
I am not pro segregation in that way. I am pro researching and defining better means. But let's look at it from a couple of different aspects. So I'm a guy who's less favored the prison population. This isn't actually rather most favored. Say I'm that other guy, right? Then I get put into somebody else's cell, right? And they have a reputation to hold, and they have the politics that they have to adhere to for their own sake. And so that person decides that they want to attack me, right? For whatever reason. Could be the nature of my charges, could be something that I said to somebody, could just be the way that I carry myself in the population, right? They're not allowed to live with me. That's a political thing. You either do or you don't. You become just like that other person. Well, if I'm the person that can't defend myself, I need that other person to be defend you. Well, away from me, or I need to be moved away from them. If for whatever reason, I just can't be in spaces with other people without causing harm to them, or other people can be in spaces with me without causing harm to me, then you got to segregate. That's just the nature of the beast. Otherwise, people are just going to be hurt, and that sucks. Now, do I think that they use the whole and segregation in a way that's safe or at all healthy or in any way humane? No, I don't. So I guess to reiterate what I was saying is the way that the whole is being used right now, I don't agree. I think it's completely inhumane. I think it breaks emotionally. I think it adds insult to injury. A lot of times, I think there's a lot of other things, a lot of other ways to discipline people that don't require just locking them in a box and taking any kind of human connection and contact away from them outside of a 2-inch by 6-inch food slot or however big, 12-inch food slot. And I know this because I spent 6 months in the first time I went to prison over some extortion stuff, so whatever. I like free things. And then I spent, another 3 months in the hole over a fight that I got into because, well, like, so beat people up, stupid. But moving along, and none of those times did I ever grow with you, and did I ever mature mentally or emotionally? No, it was all of those times were just, it's just survival until about maybe a month or two into it, and then it just becomes resistance. And then when you get back into like people, I still to this day, so I'm diagnosed among a lot of things, but PTSD is the one diagnosis that's relevant to this particular situation. And it's because of those times that I was just by myself. And somebody with undiagnosed mental health disorders in a prison setting, and because of the nature of prison, you're left all by yourself to your own devices. Torture. It was absolute torture. I think I sang so many, like every school song I could think of in my head. Because of this, you got nothing. Couldn't draw that didn't pass my time, so I said, and then you get back into general population even worse. So general population is a shot from you see maybe 1 or 2 people ever for 3, 6, 9 months. Some people years, depending on the severity of their infractions, right? To you're seeing other inmates. So those people I can at least relate to because we have similar backgrounds, right? And imagine getting out. Like releasing, I know guys who released from the hole who, when I was doing time with them on mainline, had such a great outlook for like getting out and like spending time with their family and things like that. And then they got into a fight, so they had to spend 6 months before release, and they come right back because it's like, how am I supposed to go shopping in a grocery store with the chaos and the crowds? And like, I don't know if anybody's seen Winkle on a weekend, but it is absolutely just the
stressful for people who've never done something.
Right. And so, I absolutely believe that solitary confinement especially, but just the segregation in general is in ways that are really helping people. But I also believe that we need to figure out some kind of system to just separate people who are hurting each other.
Because some people who have intent and want to just hurt people need to be in a different kind of environment, away from people who don't have that urge. There's a difference.
Well, and recognizing that, like, the propensity to cause violence in prison is often perpetrated by the indoctrination of, into your gang life or into the mindset that that's how you flex. Which goes back to what Tim said earlier about how he had to have this switch of the idea that his power doesn't come from violence. And when you're thrown into an environment where you're surrounded by people who, or whatever, whether it's gangs or family or survival on the streets, whatever it is, that's not what they want to exert control and to not become a victim. And again, it's that idea of this line in the sand of either you're hunting or you're hunted. And in prison, I think that's very real. And I mean, Tim obviously kind of described it.
Nope,
Yeah,
it is.
it's hard to just be like a neutral, random, like floating through my time. I haven't met anybody who did time and just floated. Like they had to assert authority, stand up for themselves. Conversations that very easily turn into violent situations on our own camera in the yard, whatever. And so when you're in that environment and the solution is just don't, you're not allowed to be violent, and if you're violent, whether it's self-defense or you perpetrated it. The fact that that's like the blanket answer is a major ethical problem. And I think if you're on the fence about like, yeah, but like they need to be punished and one of those people, I think you have to listen again to what Tim just said about what does everybody inside want more than anything else? They want to get the hell out of there. And so to think about the time in the hole makes you actually scared, even more scared to release, that you are scared of the thing that you want more than anything else. And then like you have guys escaping on purpose to do more time. What does that tell you about our system? What does it say about the prison system? That doesn't rehabilitate anybody. You're making it worse. You're making it worse if you've got somebody who's more scared of getting out than they are of getting in another fight and going back in the hole, because that's normal now. That's what they've been conditioned to do and think. That is a reflection of the system. That's not a reflection of who they are.
It's interesting you say that because it kind of made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Because I served this country, right? I'm veteran. I had that exact same conversation about leaving the military.
Yeah.
Like, even though I was disabled, I had a disability, I was hurt, I was getting out no matter what, I almost wanted to just pretend like I wasn't hurt just so I could stay in, because the idea of getting out of the military was so scary, even though it was the one thing I wanted more than life itself.
Yeah.
Just want to get the hell out of that situation, because like I'll never forget that first moment where you realize that you are government property and all your rights have been taken away.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Literally property of the state.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to interrupt, but I have a lot of friends actually who were current and former military veterans. The overall kind of when we have conversations about me being incarcerated and them on duty, it's the way that they describe it. They're like, it sounds like it's pretty much the same for both of us. It's just the barbed wires on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, and that extends to staff too. I mean, I don't want to make this all about COs, but to recognize too that it breaks. I read a great article, and this comes up again in my research. I'm doing my doctorate this year, so I'm in the thick.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Well, the point I'm making is that it doesn't even feel like a choice to me anymore. When the prison closed, I had a full-on identity crisis. What do I do if I don't teach in prison? I got a full-time job in a nonprofit in Portland for a while, for 3 months exactly, actually, and I was fired because I couldn't adjust. I'm like, wait, so there's restaurants all around me. I can eat whatever I want. I can have my phone in my desk. Like, I felt like I was breaking the rules just having my phone, because that's not a thing. You don't bring your phone in, you're fired instantly, right? I'm surrounded by people who share my values. I'm not always looking over my shoulder. I don't have to remember what my keys are. I don't have to walk every single door and check it. I'm not on camera 24/7. Like, so the staff too. I couldn't adjust. I couldn't adjust to just like civilian desk job life. It's still weird for me. And I didn't do time as an inmate. I definitely don't want to compare my experience to somebody who's been incarcerated or been in the military and seen combat or anything like that, right? But that's real too. And in my research, I have found again and again that there are several citations that say, in my opinion accurately, prison damages everybody who goes inside. Everybody who interacts with the prison system comes out jaded. PTSD, I feel like everybody who served time definitely comes out with some level of post-traumatic. I mean,
I would argue not at the same level.
And maybe not levels, but like you got the blue flavor and you got the red flavor and you got the green flavor. Like there's no hierarchy of trauma, right? Like because each person's going to interpret that and deal with their own shit in their own way, and they have their own triggers. It's a different flavor being in the military, and only military people can understand what blue PTSD, for example. Yeah. Blue PTSD looks like, whereas mine is black and tan, right? Or yours is gray. And yeah, so of course it's different. And again, I like Keanu says, look, you can't just lump everybody into y'all have PTSD, so therefore y'all need to take this medication and do this.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. It's very nuanced. It's very much about the intersections of the trauma that you already brought to prison in the first place, and now add on the layers of incarceration and your specific facility and your specific racial experience and your specific interactions with staff and the specific things you did to survive your time and the specific things that came with reentry, because reentry is traumatizing too for most people I've worked with. So it's nuanced, it's layered, it's different. My PTSD, which I'm diagnosed with, is very different from yours or from Tim's, right? Because we don't have the same lifelines, we don't have the same experiences across time.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say on this podcast too is that, no two people have the same experience in life, even identical twins.
Right.
So if you discount the fact that you have no idea what somebody has gone through to get to this point in their life, you should probably check judgment at the door, because you don't know anything about that person.
Yeah.
And what they had to go through just to be here in this present.
You see screaming children and like buying certain candies or whatever people do.
Whatever those.
Whatever you think when you're in Winco. I mean, I'm with them. Like, I see somebody with 8 kids, and I'm like, how did you get that? I'm not somebody likes my kids because I'm not that person. I had one, I was over it.
And so when people are done serving time, right? And I've always been sort of curious about this piece because, like, when I got in the out of the military, there was really nothing there to support that transition. Within 6 months or 3 months before you got out, were you ever offered a transition class or anything to sort of help along those lines?
I'm actually very glad you asked that question. Here we go. All right, I love story time. I've been to prison twice, right? One time in Oregon, one time in the state of Washington. Two completely night and day, 180-degree experiences, right? And Oregon was the first time, right? So I went to visit Oregon. In Oregon, no educational opportunities were offered here. It was basically like, do your time. If you're lucky when you get a job, you might have somebody. But if you're lucky and you have family that have money, I was not that lucky. You might have somebody for many bucks. Did not have great experience. There's a lot of gang activity in Oregon prisons. And so I got wrapped up in that. Like I was talking about earlier, I spent a lot of time in the hole. Right? My experience in Washington, complete 180 as soon as I got to, like, I called my parent institution right after I got out of basically. It's the argument because of receiving. As soon as I got out of intake, I almost within a month I started my first college class. And so, like, that kind of started my journey in terms of, like, education or whatever, which was super lucky for me. And here's why. And this is the answer to your question is, so I was basically like, and it's Lauren's fault. She did it. It's her freaking fault. Like, she fucking fucked around and created the monsters. She literally held my hand through every single question that I had about education, every single question I had about anything, because I did not know shit. I had a little bit of background, like 5 years background in like construction stuff. I did roofing when I got out of prison the first time, because what kind of job can you get to pay any kind of bills except for construction or factory work or things like that, right? But I didn't have an education. I didn't have any skills. I didn't have like the upbringing where my parents were any kind of successful, like had successful careers. My mom was a hairdresser. You know what I mean? My grandma was a boomer and was a secretary. And as soon as my grandpa died, she retired because the only reason she worked was so she wouldn't have to be hanging around the house with him. He wasn't there anymore, so she didn't have to work. This is the life that I grew up in. Nobody taught me how to be any kind of success. And I knew that I didn't want to keep coming back to prison. And I knew that I had to stop selling drugs, stop committing crimes, like stop doing the dumb shit that I was doing that was bringing me to prison, right? And education seemed like a plausible way out, but I didn't know what that looked like. And so it was like she'd go and like photocopy, because we're not allowed to have the internet or whatever, photocopy like career tests, like to see what kind of like jobs you want stuff. And she would all those
assessments.
and like if I was interested in some kind of career path, she would like photocopy like what that looked like and stuff. And that's how I kind of stumbled onto computer science, right, and software engineering and things like that. I don't know if we talked about this, but I graduated Washington State University in Vancouver, with a bachelor's in computer science, minor in mathematics. I am a computer scientist. Yeah, exactly. But I didn't get there on purpose. Like we stumbled on it because she had the willingness. I just had questions. And when you don't know, you don't even know the questions that you have. And she was like the miracle was that she was available for long enough and cared just enough to answer my questions in such a way that I kept asking questions, right? So when I asked a question, she didn't make me feel like it was a dumb question. Because I'm used to, if I ask you a question, you brush me off because fuck me, right? But I'm not in this society. Right.
Don't get me on my soapbox about autism and questions.
Right. And she's literally been fighting for me this whole time. She's not the only one who's been fighting for me, but she's definitely been like if it was a pirate ship, she'd be like the one steering the wheel, or maybe the one up in like the pole, like at the top. Oh yeah, screaming, go to the next, to the next. But yeah, so she would get me, and so we had decided that I was going to continue my education. I decided that I was going to continue my education beyond there, but it was a team effort. And so I was going to go to Columbia. I was from Vancouver. And so as soon as she knew that, right, she started like giving me scholarship applications to fill out, right, for potential scholarships I might be eligible for. She would give me job descriptions and job listings because she was an employee of Clark College. So they would give her as, a professor, like, hey, if you got any students that you think can be good at this job, let them know, right? And she would let me know while I'm still incarcerated. She would help me with like writing a resume and a cover. I never done that. Do I need a resume with selling drugs? You know what I mean? My resume is the 45. I got a resume for you. Click. Okay, do I get the job? Thanks. Let's go. So all these things that I never knew how to do, and I didn't even know I needed to know how to do. I kind of knew, but I don't know. You know what I mean? And she helped me do all those things, right? And so the really cool thing, and I tell this people a lot, right? Like this is the power of people that actually care, that have power, right? So like me and no power, right? Try to get some, doesn't work out usually the best. Or even just as a teacher right now, see, I'm just a teacher, still power. More power than I am.
So much power.
No worries. Here's the list of questions. You'll be fine. The fuck? Thick ass khakis and probably looking like goodness knows what.
Like a tomato.
Yeah.
That was tomato Tim.
Tomato Tim for sure. Yeah. I got offered the job, right? So here's what release looked like to me. I had my hand out. I had a job set up before I got out. I had school. I was like almost
job on campus.
Jobs on campus to the college that I was gonna be going to. Scholarship. Like the money because of scholarships. FAFSA already filled out because they had like reentry services to help you fill out the FAFSA. All these things, and like that huge like push to help like foster my success. I don't think I could be as successful as I am right now without that amount of, and I can't emphasize enough the amount of extra work that she did that she didn't have to do, that was not in her job description. That was just because she believed in me and just because she knew that that's what I needed to be successful. And I know because I didn't have that the first time I went to prison, and I didn't do shit but go back to drugs. Didn't do shit but get back on drugs. Didn't do shit but the same shit that I did. Right? And she did that, and now I'm out, and it's 6 years later, and I'm here helping this, amazing startup following my dreams. I'm also, a graduate, a college graduate, a university graduate
with a BC degree. Like you didn't major in like bullshit, like I did.
Yeah.
You got your real degree.
I am an engineer, as old as, engineers who have been working in the field for a little while are, but that's okay because, I'd rather be 42 and just starting my career in, software development and engineering and just being in this moment with the Rebel Academy and like all the amazing things that's going to bring into the world, than to be 20 years ago and not have the experiences that created the first point.
I want to be careful though, because every time we tell this story, every time you tell this story, people come to me and they're like, "You're amazing, like you're so talented, you're like this hero, and you're just so good." No, I disagree, because this shouldn't be an example of the exception. And it is the fact that you got lucky enough to meet somebody who gives enough of a shit about you to put in a little extra. It's not like I stayed an extra 25 hours to bend over backwards and break a bunch of rules to get you a job interview.
Right.
We didn't break any rules. I operated the phone. I handled. My supervisor knew about all the things. It's not like I built something out of thin air for one guy and took a leap of faith because I needed some attention. This should be the way it is. And if you think about the fact that there are lots of Tims floating around in prison systems all over the country who aren't lucky enough to find a staff person who gives enough of a shit to do their job correctly and plug them into opportunities like college and scholarships and jobs and whatever it looks like, whether it's sober housing or any housing. That's a big thing for folks getting out of the where I'm going to live. And I don't know how to pay rent, but it's tripled since I tried.
Yeah.
And I'm a felon, and they're not going to rent me anyway, so I'm going to be living under a bridge. Are they going to sell heroin? If you don't give enough of a shit and you are working inside, then why are you here? Why do you do the work that you do if it is not to place springboards in front of the Tims of the prison system and to equip them with the tools that are required so they don't go hurt more people or die? And it's not that I'm special or that Tim is special. It doesn't need to be that way. It's like when you see the story of like the school raised $10,000 so Billy could have his wheelchair. Why is that a feel-good story? Fucking insurance should be covering that. The government should be covering basic necessities for people with disabilities, especially children who do not choose to need a wheelchair. Fuck our clearance running booster club bullshit fundraisers to get some kid a wheelchair when it's a basic requirement for life. What are the basic requirements for life as adults? You need some kind of income. You need a fucking place to live. You need to feel safe. Right?
Yeah.
If we can't quit people getting out of prison with that, what the fuck are we doing? What is it for? What is it really for? And if you're a teacher and you go in and you jump onto the bandwagon of everybody in here is a piece of shit and I'm just gonna put my feet on the desk and those who really want to get a GED will figure out how to do it on their own, and reentry is not my job, so I can just wave my hand and say that's not an appropriate request. Go back to your book like we're trained to do in core. You're probably in the wrong item. Yeah. In my humble goddamn opinion.
Well, and that's why I say that story, and that's why I emphasize it so much, because it's not good. It should be. You're absolutely right. It should be.
Why I get pissed off?
Well, and every right to feel that way, because how many people could be where I'm at right now who are already back in prison
for no other reason than just a tiny bit of extra support,
because nobody believed in that person, and so they believe in themselves.
And it's partly not believing, it's partly just being lazy, it's partly adopting this mindset of, well, you're all just shitty, so what if I don't need to send it back, you don't owe you anything. Fine. That's all part of the problem. But I think another part of the problem is also just a lack of awareness about a lot of the things Tim just said. Tim didn't have parents that told him you could be anything you want to be. My dad told me when I was a kid, you can be anything you want to be. And so I grew up knowing I would go to college. It was a matter of which one. It was a matter of which four-year university am I going to go to and which scholarships will I accept. The world is at my fingertips. 16 and I'm picking out college classes when I was a sophomore in high school. And for me, growing up, pretty privileged, upper middle class, white, married parents, stable home, never wanted for anything. We moved to, that was really my only complaint. To learn when I first got into adult ed as a volunteer tutor for a GED program in Eugene, and seeing that adults who have children and make minimum wage, who were making less than I was in my 20s, couldn't really read. They couldn't really do fifth grade math. These are people older than I was at the time. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, wow, okay, so this is a whole world that's unfamiliar to me. I don't know what it's like growing up with parents who use drugs. I don't know what it's like growing up with no parents or foster parents. I don't know what it's like growing up and being told that you're an accident or that you're not going to amount to much, and that really all you're good for is banging nails and making babies and fill in the blank with the rhetoric or the lack thereof that comes with upbringing. But in getting into this work and working with GED students, I realized very early on, how much privilege I had and how valuable my education was when it was just normal to me. I'm like, this isn't Bible, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, this is what I do. This is what my parents did. This is what my father does. And to realize that's not everybody's reality. And I think a lot of folks who end up being faculty, as I was for a long time, don't have those paths either. They have paths similar to mine. And if you don't learn that there is a literacy crisis in this country, particularly in corrections education and in GE classes in and outside of prison, and you really don't try to empathize with the lack of resources and what it's like living in your car and what it's like being addicted to some serious substance, including alcohol. You don't know what it's like to be told, to never be told that you can do anything and you can be anyone you want to be. And the impact that can have on somebody psychologically and career-wise is often the road to prison. And to not understand that and to just instead say, well, you're just young and you make bad choices. You missed the boat. You're on the pirate ship. You want to go back to the analogy, like you don't get it. You're not, it's not clicking with you. The meaningfulness of your work and how you need to shift your mindset about the people you are here.
And I always liken it to like, and it's one of the things that I talk a lot about. I don't know how to say this other than if you're in a position like that, you're in a position of power and privilege.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't recognize that they're in this power of privilege and power.
Absolutely.
The best way to exert that power and privilege is to share the power and privilege.
Yes.
Because without shared power, there can be no peace. Like, there has to be shared power.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing. And I remember, like, one of the things that always struck me as well, right, is this, because I've been talking to musicians now for about a year, and one of my favorite musicians is Johnny Wheels. Johnny Wheels is a quadriplegic, but he's the lead singer of the band. And every single place he goes to perform, his bandmates have to carry him on stage. And it's like,
so
why can't a venue spend $340 and get a freaking temporary ramp? Like, you would think. But every single time he plays, his band lifts him up on stage. I was at the Muddy Awards this year. They had to lift him on stage 12 times because he received like 12 awards. And it's like, he's coming, he's winning all of these awards. Can you just take a step back and go, maybe we should? And so it's like people just lose sight of, like, it's just because the other part that rubs me the wrong way when we have conversations like this is because people are under the assumption that it takes a monumental shift. It doesn't take a monumental shift. When you helped him out, it's not like you were spending 35 extra hours a week. Like, it's not a monumental, it's just, but it's so significant if you can just have that.
I think the monumentalness of it, I don't know if that's the word.
It
can be. All right. I think what's monumental about the shift that needs to take place is normalizing people who are just as impacted, just as involved as people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge, just kind of like miasma that surrounds just like the prison system, the prison industrial complex in general, is that as soon as you make that mistake, commit that crime that gets you that felony, that puts you in prison, you're not a person anymore. You're a number. And how can I help a number become anything but a number? Nobody knows how to do that, right? But how do I help this person
yes.
who has these things get out of that and get back on their feet, okay, that's a little bit easier. I mean, I think the monumental shift that really needs to happen is people just need to start seeing people who are incarcerated as people. Because people who are incarcerated are not going to start acting like people if the rest of the world doesn't think that they're people.
And the reality is anybody on this planet is one bad day away from being there.
That's correct.
You know?
And I learned that.
I know a lot of people that did nothing wrong that spent 10 years in prison because they had a joint on them. And it's like, yeah, that's the same, like, yeah.
I speak at conferences all over the country, and I've met some people who are in very affluent positions amongst their companies and things like that. And they would tell me after hearing me speak, like, the only difference between me and you is a couple of bad decisions that I didn't get caught for, you did.
And good legal representation.
Yeah.
It's all about your money.
Exactly.
We see that with our, some folks in our current administration.
I've never paid for a lawyer up front because I could never afford it.
Yeah.
I always got what they gave me.
And the fact that your income is directly tied to your potential to do time is another intrinsically problematic factor of our business and contributes to mass incarceration.
Yeah.
And that's, that correlates with people of color too. And that's, one of the most tragic parts about it. I need to bail.
And we've been at this for over an hour or two, so let's have this our final thought.
Okay.
Let's do this again.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure. For sure.
Yeah, let's do that again. Let me give my producer and have you guys back in like a month or two.
But we'd love to bring some students too by then if you have people coming on the air, on the show with us. I would say, and I mentioned this in my book, the book I wrote in 2023. I think I remember half this rhetoric, and it's in the forthcoming book too that needs some work still. But people ask me all the time, or did when I was working inside, what's it like? Isn't that dangerous? Isn't it scary? Like, people like harassing you, and isn't it hard? I'm like, it's hard. Nothing reasonable. It's mostly the staff and policies that are counterproductive to our mission as teachers. But I would try to explain it like everybody who's inside has lost their color. Like everything, think about the world in color, right? You look around this room, there's blue and green. I can see Tim, he's a white guy, he's in his face. His hair has color, his life has color, his eyes have color. And on the inside, it's as if people have been like the vampire of prison or of life before prison has sucked the color out of it, living in this black and white space. And prison is very black and white in a lot of ways. In the dichotomy of good people, in the dichotomy of staffers, in the dichotomy of you're either with us, you're with the terrorists, right? Like that whole mindset of good and bad, gang or not gang, or black and white, or Latino or Asian, whatever. The really stark contrast. And education has so much potential because it's operating against the stark contrast of prison. And they have completely opposite missions. DOC in prison is all about your past. But the one thing y'all have in common is at some point, some judge somewhere said you gotta do time. Whether you actually did the crime or not is not even unanimously true, right? Like some people are innocent. And so you have this past/criminal-based place against an institution that's inside, like almost like a cancer to the prison, which is a proud place to be, that says we're going to focus on your future, we're going to focus on hope and what comes next. And the contrast, the black and whiteness of that is so powerful. It's like one thing I did write in the book was it's as if you've only ever seen the moon in the daytime. The moon is education on the outside, and daytime is like K-12, college, graduation ceremonies that are fun and nice. Like, oh, look, a moon in the sky. But if you've never seen the moon at night, and you see it for the first time, that's what it's like teaching inside. Because the contrast of that bright, beautiful moon against an otherwise just black backdrop, it hits so much differently. And the mission that we have as teachers is to figure out how to instill the color back into people so that when they leave, they feel and they don't feel like a shadow of themselves. They don't feel like a black and white cutout. They have eye color, they have hope, they have light, they have blood flow again, like to their souls, right? And that's why I'm so addicted to this work, and why when the prison shut down, I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how to settle for some desk job. I don't know how to do that. I'm addicted to putting the color back into people. And so with the Rebel Academy, that we are so lucky to get to carry that forward and to do that for folks who are in reentry but still haven't found color. And the reentry center that we're working with, the Northwest Regional Reentry Center specifically, where we are operating, where we have an MOU in place now, that's what we're trying to do, and it's working. And staff see it, and they are over the moon thrilled to see what Tim can do now that we've given him the reins to take that on.
It's pretty awesome.
And so for folks listening, we have events coming up that we should probably promote. We have a fundraiser at the Old Church, which is in downtown Portland on May 31st. A couple Irish bands, including mine, will be playing as the fundraiser for the Rebel Academy. You'll get to see Tim. He'll speak there. I'll be there speaking. A couple of our board members who've been through reentry also will get to speak, and we're also looking for other nonprofits whose clients need that color put back in their lives. And the GED piece is always, you're always just told to go to a campus, go to a college, and figure it out, and you really don't. The numbers that's not how it works. They need us to come to them. They need somebody who has lived experience in the system. They need people to see them as the people they are and not get lumped in a class where they already feel behind and they already feel stupid and they already feel too old and they already feel all the things. And they're not going to get their color back in these spaces. And I work for a community college. I love the work that we do, and we touch a lot of folks, but we don't touch them all. And the reentry population is definitely the one that falls in the cracks because they used to being invisible. And that's what we're trying to eradicate. And I think we're doing a pretty damn good job so far, given we've been doing that for a year.
And what's the website?
Our website is therebelacademy.org. We're also on Facebook. If you search for the Rebel Academy, look for our purple Phoenix logo. That's us.
Thank you so much. And I want to get the details of that event because I'll be there.
Cool.
Yeah. We'll wrap this up. So thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, and I can't wait to have another one like this.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you.
Y'all, I say this every time. We only live on one planet. We share the same air. Be kind. Check judgment at the door. And I'll see you next time.